Hi, I'm Arthur. And when it comes to hype trains, I am quite often captured by certain flights of fancy. And what do I mean by this? I mean, I am very quick to see Warhammer armies and make awooga car honk noises while making grabby hands at my monitor. Don't follow? Okay. When they unveiled the Leagues of Votann box, I was so smitten that I immediately ordered a box and then dedicated hundreds of my own dollars to getting an army of them. Now, I am the lone sentinel of the Leagues of Votann themselves so that I might protect and defend their legacy. I will proclaim how cool they are and how much they deserve more until they get more and then probably be disappointed at the second wave of releases and then just kinda cry or something. But it's gonna be one hell of a copium-fueled ride until we get to that point, right? So, where am I going with this? Well, when I first started this hobby, I played Tau. Little known fact about me. It was definitely a fleeting fancy of someone who just got into the hobby, but I enjoyed most of all the Kroot aspect of the Tau army roster. The Kroot are probably one of the coolest races in the game setting, at least to me. I love them. The best way to see them culturally is if you mix orcs and Tauren from World of Warcraft together. They have a deeply spiritual but hardy way of living their lives, and I want to dedicate a video to them in the future once they get more of an expanded roster, because if you couldn't tell, they have some shit on the horizon coming down the pipeline at warp speeds. I'm genuinely excited for this, and I haven't been excited for a 10th edition thing in a while, but I digress. So the Kroot are, in as simple a terms as possible, avian ancestry style creatures that have this unique ability to adapt and grow certain genetic traits within themselves that they see as beneficial through the consumption of organic matter. Meaning, they cannibalize creatures they think as being strong and beneficial enough to add their genetic stock to their own bodies. In short order, if you were a Kroot, being all Kroot-like and whatnot, one day you decide that you want to be able to support more muscle mass, so what do? You go out and eat some orcs, because their bodies support significantly more muscle mass than most races, so you get more muscular by eating more orcs. But here's the fun bit. If you eat too much of one creature for one trait, other traits will suffer or start to manifest from the creatures that you're starting to consume. These often lead to what is referred to as an evolutionary dead end, where a Kroot will generate a subspecies due to unmonitored eating habits. Good example, a Krootox was a pure-blooded Kroot that turned into a subspecies due to prioritizing muscle mass and size over everything else and losing greater brain function as a whole because of it. So they are now mostly just used as beasts of burden, which I think is cool. In Kroot society, there is a rank of individual who monitors and guides the Kroot kindred in their personal evolution. A Kroot who has the ability to instinctively know what is beneficial to eat and what isn't. This is a flesh shaper, but it goes beyond that. There are war leaders that guide mass amounts of shapers, called war shapers, but just above them is what is known as a master shaper. And the master shaper, to end all, is the topic of the video today. It may have taken a bit to get into, but the individual we are talking about today is Angkor Proc, the greatest Kroot leader to have ever lived. Which is funny because he's such a weirdly significant character, but not many people know about him. I've known about him for a while. He had a miniature for like half of an edition, and when I found out he no longer did, I was a bit upset because I originally wanted to play an all-Kroot army, which is now going to become possible. So I was upset to find out that they didn't have a named character to them and only one playable character, which is the old Kroot Shaper model. So who is Angkor Proc? He is one of the ballsiest entities to have ever existed in the entirety of Kroot society and in 40k as a whole. From my research, Kroot only gain names when they have earned one, and they have to accomplish some kind of deed that gives them a name in their entire society. And his name was given to him when, at a feast he was a part of, a significantly larger Kroot walked up and wanted to steal food from him. And instead of doing the more practical thing for your own survival in a society driven by selective cannibalism, and just, leave, he stood his ground and basically said something to the effect of, I don't know if you're looking for a fuck or a fight, either way I don't see your sister around, so sit the fuck down. So the name Angkor Prak was given to him promptly because of this. It roughly translates to essentially describe the act of a Krootox, which is a gorilla chicken, standing on its hind legs, posturing and refusing to back down, even when he might die, which is such a badass name. I mean, it's only badass if you can live up to the idea of being a 7-foot-tall gorilla chicken, which thankfully Angkor Prak did. He was a very shrewd individual, focusing on being hyper-pragmatic while also adhering to the ancient ways of Kroot society so dogmatically that it kind of gave him supernatural powers. We'll come back to this later, but I will say it is relatively interesting to see this kind of shit pop up and not be fully explained. But yes, he was a holy man who was so strict in his beliefs of Kroot spirituality that it basically won him several wars. So where to begin with him now that we've covered the basics? Well, the big thing was during his rise to power, there was a massive orc wa of greenskins that came to the home planet of the Kroot, which is Peck. These greenskins were slaughtering every Kroot they could because, well, they're orcs. It's kind of the orc thing you had to do to stay entertained. So with less than about 50,000 Kroot left on the planet, it came time where Prak's home was going to be invaded. And invaded he fucking was. Basically, he didn't see it coming, and most of the individuals of his village were attacked and more or less killed. I say more or less because Prak made it out alive and ended up rallying Kroot together to fight off orcs. See, Kroot are strong. Stronger than humans and almost as strong as a full-blown orc, but they lack the savage brutality and technology of the orcs in combat. But you find out relatively quickly that the orcs were kind of nerfed by the planet of Peck because Peck was very much a barren rock with not a lot of usable material resources. So what did Prak do in order to tip the scales in Kroot favor? Be completely 100% butt fucking sane. He would mount hit and run tactics to kill large encampments of orcs using every strength of the Kroot to their advantage. And that's when they realized that Kroot kind of had a direct counter to orcs. See, when an orc dies, they usually dissolve into spores that will spread to other places and grow into more orcs underground. But Kroot can eat the orc bodies, become more physically strong because of it, and then the spores won't even get a chance to develop and spread from the orc bodies. So you had a bunch of physically intimidating super Kroots attacking orcs, and this was again to the detriment of the orcs because in their genetics is hardwired the ability to create certain technologies. So the Kroot technology ended up jumping a few levels just because of Prak's strategy, which is just strike, kill, eat what is there, and then fade back into the tree line, which is helping them significantly push back the orcs. It got them back a considerable amount of land that they had lost to the greenskins, but eventually the inevitable problem of an army being able to put up a good fight against orcs arose, which is more orcs show up because they too want a good fight. Overwhelmed, but still putting on a good fight, Prak ended up doing some crazy shit during a ritual feast. He enacted a process of ritual scarification, cutting himself deeply over 100 times in order to show reverence for the ancestor spirits, and because of this, he ended up seeing a vision of an ambush that orcs were planning on his army. So, with this information, he countercharged, catching the orcs off guard and slaughtering them to nothing. This was a bit of a golden age, I mind you, propped up by the fact that he basically just had a psychic, non-psychic vision. But eventually, this age would end by the orcs starting to amass so many numbers that they were overwhelming the Kroot that were putting up a fight. They were still fighting and putting up a decent battle, but the orcs were just overwhelming. At this point, someone who had allied with the Kroot in the past had showed up to help. The fucking Tau of all people. The Tau and the Kroot had worked together in the past, as the Tau had hired Kroot mercenaries. But this is where Prak kinda took his place as the most significant member of Kroot society in history, and on a ritual site known as the Oathstone swore allegiance to the Tau for the greater good and a bit of pay from time to time, as long as the Tau worked with them to stop the greenskins from overwhelming Peck, which they did. See, the Tau augmented Prak's strategy of attacking small orc encampments humans, killing them, eating them, and then moving on before more show up. But now, with advanced tech, they had the ability to hit larger groups, and eventually, Peck was 100% green skin free, baby. Proc was heralded as a master shaper for many, many years, and he ended up living, I think, for over 100 years before he died fighting pirate orcs, which I think is what he would have wanted, TBH. Angor Proc is such a fun character, and is the reason why the Kroot are an ancillary member of the Tau in the first place, which sucks when he's barely ever mentioned. Maybe he was retconned out of the setting, but in my heart, he's not. I love Proc, and I think that in the new Kroot release, they should have a named Kroot character sharing the lineage of Angor Proc, because he's cool as fuck. He's stubborn, crazy, probably a latent psyker who can see the future, and is genuinely one of the more interesting alien characters I've read about in 40k. But it's also fun because he has a concise beginning, middle, and end. Fighting the orcs, his youth, and his death are all kind of documented to some degree, which you never really see in such a short order. That's more or less everything we know about him. So what do you think about Angor Proc and the upcoming Kroot release? Think you're gonna hop on the train with me too, or nah? Let me know in the comments section down below. I'd love to start a conversation about the Kroot. And also, remember to like and subscribe. Special thanks to my channel members for supporting me, and if you want to support me as well as gain access to additional content, then become a channel member today. Thanks again for watching. Until next time.